Thank you, Phoebe. Once again, you do us proud. We shall miss your wise words next year, but I'm sure Colleen will be up to the task next time. The next item on the agenda, my pleasure to ask Mark Anderson to present the Chief Executive's report for 2015.
Thanks very much, Roger, and hello everyone, and it's wonderful to stand here and present this annual report to you. I'm a little bit worried. We've heard that some people think that the AGM starts at 3, so there could be people that are going to be coming in half an hour, which would be unfortunate. So my job is to report on our work during 2015. You'll find in front of you there's an annual report which also summarizes some of our work. One of the most difficult jobs we have during the year is actually summarizing all the great amount of work that's been done by our organization. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly through a few slides to share with you some of our achievements during 2015. We ended last year on a fairly high note. BirdLife International did a review, a new system they developed called Quality Assurance System, to evaluate the BirdLife partners' performance. So all 120 partners' performance was evaluated. 101 questions were asked, online questions. We had to submit supporting documents, and we came out with flying colors, which was very pleasing indeed. And I think of all 120 partners, we were one of the top performers, which was very, very encouraging for us. Obviously, some room for improvement here and there, but it was nice to get this favorable review. And in your report too, you'll see a summary of a review that Professor Peter Ryan has done of our conservation work, and equally Peter has come forward with a nice review of the conservation work we do. There's a more detailed review that I have available if anybody'd like that. Peter's review, I'll maybe just send that to you. So we're doing some really good stuff, and it's due to a big team. Now, this is the BirdLife South Africa staff in 2015 at our staff meeting. I think the only one missing in that image was Ross, who was traveling internationally at the time. But no single person or no program, no group of people can take credit for all the achievements. It's a collaborative effort. I think everybody sitting in this room today is contributing to the fantastic work that we do. And I feel really, at times people heap some of the praise on me and on some of our staff, and although we do appreciate it, is a large number of people who are contributing to our success. One of these people is Dr. Roelof van der Merwe, who unfortunately passed away at the end of last year, and I'd like to dedicate this presentation to him. He's no longer with us. He was a passionate conservationist. I was fortunate to spend a lot of time with him during the last few years. He died relatively young at 57. He gives us a lot of money through the Charles van der Merwe Trust, I think 1.7 million rand this year, funds a number of our projects and programs. So I'd like to dedicate this talk to Roelof. Okay, so he provides the money. The money's certainly been helpful, as well as the income that we received from other sources. And that graph illustrates a few points. Importantly, as you can see, the distance from the histogram and that red line, and that means that our income has exceeded our expenditure, which is, of course, very important for us. In the past, we've spent more than we've had, and we've had to dip into the sustainability fund. We've now been able to replenish that sustainability fund over the last few years. So 2015 was the 6th consecutive year that we made a small surplus. We're very proud of that. The green in those histograms illustrates the conservation expenditure, and the blue, the admin expenditure. You can see there, particularly in 2015, that a greater proportion, about 2/3 of our funding is spent on conservation, and about a third is spent on admin, sorry. This is just another graph which kind of illustrates it as well. Unfortunately, this projector is not projecting brilliantly, so you can't see very clearly. But what it does show over the last few years is our income has exceeded our expenditure. And it's the way we try to manage the organization, that we do not suffer any losses. Very importantly is to find the funding to sustain core. Alan Knott Craig, our good friend Alan Knott Craig, who you know is not very well at the moment, he's retired down to wilderness, told me a few years ago to do away with that word core and rather refer to it as bird species and habitat conservation administrative support. We've decided to stick with core for the time being. But the challenge really is to find funding for core. That pie diagram illustrates where we're getting our core funding from. And you can see a big proportion, the sort of orange wedge, is the golden bird patrons, 1.62 million rand last year. It was Darby Chamberlain's idea. Quite a number of our golden bird patrons are in this room today. We really need to thank Darby for his clever idea, and we need to thank our golden bird patrons for their ongoing support. It's relatively easy to raise money for projects, very, very difficult to raise funding for the administrative work which supports the conservation projects. The blue square, the blue piece of the pie is funding we received from the RSPB. The green is funding we've received from the Untitled Charitable Trust. Both of those are slowly coming to an end. Sorry, Ross, is there? Okay, let's hang on while Ross tries to fix the screen.
Lay hands on the computer.
Sorry, it's a very dodgy cable we have here. Okay, so the blue and the green are two sources of income that are not going to continue into the future, unfortunately. The RSPB funding for institutional support is going to end. The Huntshouse Charitable Trust contribution for our core work is also going to end. Okay, one of the achievements, the most significant achievements last year, we believe, is Bristol House, our new head office. And we're very proud of the new office. It's a project which we thought would take a number of years to achieve. Thanks to Pamela and Neville Isdall, the significant contribution, as well as the donations from other people, we were able to achieve this new office relatively quickly. Importantly, this funding was allocated specifically for this project, specifically for the purchase of the new office. It was not money that was allocated to conservation. The Isdalls, in particular, wanted to leave a legacy in Johannesburg. They wanted to have a property named after them. That was one of the conditions of the donation. It was very important for us to move to a new home. The previous office wasn't suited. We had insufficient space. There were some security risks that we were worried about. We had repeated break-ins. And we also, the property was zoned incorrectly. It was zoned residential and not for business. So we're very proud of our new office. And for those who haven't visited the office, please come and pay us a visit. Come around in the morning and you can come and purchase some items at the shop. In November last year, we had a function where we wet the roof of the new office, a function that the Isdalls also paid for. It was a very grand affair, and a lot of you attended that function. One of the successful events that we held last year. We've held a number of other events in 2015. One of them was the inaugural Flufftail Festival, a festival that was used to raise awareness, obviously, about flufftails, and particularly the white-winged flufftail, critically endangered species, but also other water birds, as well as wetlands and water. And it's a partnership between Eskom, Grand Water, and BirdLife South Africa. You can see the tap duck there who entertained the children. We put table talkers on the tables in all the restaurants in Sandton City, posters and tool wobblers up on the tools throughout Sandton City. This year, we held the event at Cresta Shopping Centre. We also held a very successful photographic competition during the Oceans of Life Festival. And those are some of the winning images. A large number of other events have been held. We launched the IBA Directory in Johannesburg at the time of a Rare Bird Club visit. And in the top slide, bottom right, is Nick Prentice, one of the Rare Bird Club members and also the treasurer of BirdLife International. We've held a number of other events to raise money for our conservation work. And the bottom slide shows Phil Leggett, the voice of cycling, who's done the commentary on the Tour de France for many decades, and he's been helping the IBA program raise funding for their work. We also have an exhibit table at the Photo and Film Expo and other events in Johannesburg, and Shireen and her team in the membership program use the opportunity to raise awareness about our organization, but very importantly, to recruit new members and magazine subscribers. And our magazine continues to do very well under the chairmanship of the Management Committee of Darby Chamberlain. We're very proud of the magazine. We've now produced it for more than 3 years. I think we're in our 21st issue now, and it is going from strength to strength. And really a feather in the cap of Eve Gracie, our editor, Bryony van Wyk, our designer, and the rest of the magazine team. In this graph, you can see that the subscriber numbers in particular, the red line at the bottom, is showing us a positive increase, a nice positive trend. We have more and more magazine subscribers. The green graph, which is a sort of up and down, the green line is the retail sales. They're up and down, but there's a general positive trend there. We are selling more of the magazines in retail. And the good news, which we heard just 2 weeks ago, is that we're going to be in another 169 Pick and Pay stores, which brings us to about 220 Pick and Pay stores around the country. Unfortunately, you can see the blue line at the top. We have had a slight decrease in the number of members during the last few months, and these are members who receive the magazine as a membership benefit. And there's reasons for that, which I could speak to later if you're interested. So the magazine has been very important. The main aim of the magazine is to create awareness about birds, about bird conservation, and about our organization. We also do other things to raise awareness about our work and our partnerships with companies like Zeiss. We have this billboard which is developed, and one of our staff, Dale Wright, is the actor we used. Took a while for Mel Tripp, our advertising and marketing advisor, to get that crystal barber to sit in Dale's cap. Nevertheless, eventually happened to take that picture. This has been up on billboards around the country and many other billboards, and we're grateful for the contribution we receive from Continental Outdoor Media. The value over the years of those billboards has been massive, in the millions of rands. We've been quite innovative in the way that we create awareness about the work that we do, including last year during Bird of the Year. Bird of the Year last year, as some of you will know, most of you will know, is the blue crane. And we produced posters and pin badges and lesson plans and other materials which were distributed widely around the country. We also put up these very clever banners on cranes in Santon. That's actually on the new Sassel building show, and the sign says "Real Cranes Fly." Again, Mel Tripp's very clever idea. And this was a talking point in Johannesburg for some time. We also ran another sort of marketing campaign last year, and one that was a little bit more controversial, but it remains controversial till today, is the announcement of the discovery of this new species called the Tulliver. And the Tulliver, the picture on the right, is actually a photoshopped lappet-faced vulture. Some people think vultures are ugly. We asked Utopia, our ad agency, to Photoshop a vulture into something pretty. They assumed that was pretty. We then made an announcement across South Africa, across the country, saying that we discovered a new species in the Mapungubwe area. We found 4 nests of these birds, the Tulliver. Tulliver, for those who don't know, is an anagram for vulture. You take the letters in the word vulture, scramble them up, you get Tulliver. So Saturday Star were in on the story with us. They put those posters on lampposts throughout Johannesburg on that Saturday morning, and we made the announcement on Facebook and elsewhere. Within 36 hours, I think we had a reach of about 350,000 people on Facebook. So very significant. I was very worried. My past chairman, Peter Sullivan, was in East Africa at that stage on a UN mission. I emailed him and I said, Peter, should I be worried? Is my job in jeopardy for this controversial campaign? A credible scientific organization renouncing the discovery of a new species. And he said, don't worry, he's been following it through the day. We're achieving exactly what we wanted to achieve. We did, however, bring the announcement of the reveal forward. We decided that we will release the video, the YouTube video, which shows the reverse photoshopping of the Tulliver to the lappet-faced vulture. We brought it forward a few days, released it on the Wednesday instead of the Saturday on International Vulture Awareness Day. The key message of the Tulliver campaign was this: if we can get this passionate about discovering a new species, and you can understand that the Twitchers were really excited about this new species that they could go and observe in Mapungubwe. So if we can get this passionate about discovering a new species, why can't we get as passionate about losing one? And that was really the message. Utopia, our ad agency, our pro-bono ad agency, asked whether a media company that contacted them could run a little exercise to determine what our global reach was through the Tulliver campaign. We agreed. They undertook this research and they produced a very thick report, little of which I understand. Our global reach was 81.4 million people. So this little Taliban campaign was far more effective than previous press releases we put out during International Vulture Awareness Day. Okay, that's just some of the awareness work. I'm just going to run through a few slides talking about some of our conservation work, and obviously this is the bread and butter of the organization. This is what we do. This is what we're about. We're about conserving birds and their habitats. Starting with terrestrial bird conservation, and this is Hanneline Smith-Robinson's program. There's a lot of work that's done by her and her staff. Just mentioning a couple of the points. She's obviously got an extensive program underway on white-winged flufftails, one of our critically endangered species, possibly our rarest species. Research is being undertaken. Some of you would have heard some of the work earlier this week, particularly the genetics work, which is shown that the Ethiopian and South African birds are genetically similar, identical. So it's one population that's moving between the two regions. She also participated in an African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement white-winged flufftail international working group meeting in Ethiopia. Lots happening on the white-winged flufftail front. We also hope to raise money, and those who have received the March-April issue of African BirdLife magazine will see the appeal that we've included to raise money for the facility we'd like to construct at the Pretoria Zoo, the National Zoological Gardens. We're also tracking secretary birds, and Ernst Retief gave a fascinating presentation yesterday on the secretary bird work. This is not just knowledge that we'd like to gain because we don't know how far secretaries move. There's so many reasons, so many things that we are finding that are going to improve our conservation work to conserve this threatened species. And I was very impressed with some of the results, particularly seeing the kind of environments, the landscape the secretary bird is using. We think it's using a lot of the landscape. There's actually a little of the landscape it's using because some of it is transformed and are clearly unsuitable for secretary birds. We're also involved in tighter falcon work with Dr. Andrew Jenkins and his team, one of our also very threatened species. And then also Hanneline and a team coordinated a project to study and survey southern banded snake eagles in KwaZulu-Natal. And Johan du Plessis gave a presentation about that earlier this week too. We're also very proud of the work that we've done through the Ngula Partnership. It's really a partnership between Middlepit Wetland Trust, ESCO, and BirdLife South Africa, in Ngula and the border of KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State. And David Bapisa, who was the initial person employed by this partnership at Ngula, received his PhD at the end of last year on adaptive management program for the high altitude grasslands, which will benefit grassland birds. Very importantly, the results of his findings will not only benefit the Ngula property, but the high altitude grasslands over a wider area. We're also doing other work at Ngula, species monitoring, developing species action plans. We've also been involved with the proclamation of the property as a nature reserve. Okay, we're very involved in renewable energy work, and this is work that's funded by Investec. Samantha Ralston's our project manager. Very importantly, you need to understand that we support renewable energy, but we support the responsible development of renewable energy. There were a few presentations on this during the last few days. There's lots of activities we're involved in, site screening, setting standards for impact assessments and monitoring. We've been developing guidelines for both wind and solar, quality control and oversight. Very importantly, we don't get involved in doing environmental impact assessments. We'd like to remain the referee and not the player too. We're involved in capacity building, particularly with the Department of Environmental Affairs, communication and information exchange. There's a wind energy specialist group and a forum that meets annually. We've also been involved in identifying research priorities and collaborating with the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute going into the future on a number of important projects to look at the potential impacts of wind and solar on birds. Okay, we're very involved in seabird conservation work, and I think a lot of you'll be aware of this. There's been quite a few presentations the last few days. One bird that we're very worried about is the African penguin. We don't know how many birds we had, but it's estimated that about 100 years ago we could have had 1 million pairs. We're down to less than 20,000 today. So we're doing a lot of work on this very threatened species. One is the work with fisheries and the island closure experiments, and those continue. We have new capacity in the program. Dr. Tara Morris was appointed last year to undertake this island closure work and also to work on the tracking of African penguins, and her work is funded by the Charles van der Merwe Trust. Christina Hagen was moved across to another position, the Pamela Isdell Fellow of Penguin Conservation, And her responsibility is mainly going to be to see that we establish this new mainland colony for African penguins. It's probably going to be at Plettenberg Bay. And you would have heard a bit more about that earlier in the week too. We're very excited about the work that we've received through the FAO, $1.5 million, to implement some work in the high seas. And this is really to try and address the problems of seabird bycatch and improve the mitigation measures that are used. Bronwyn Marie, who's been the leader of our Albatross Task Force for a number of years, resigned, and she's now taken up the position of project coordinator for this very important project. She's going to have a lot of responsibilities. I had a meeting with her a few days ago. She's very nervous about all the challenges that lie ahead for her, but she's going to be managing the reporting and logistics, managing the team, arranging 4 big global capacity building workshops. She's going to undertake the first ever global assessment of seabird bycatch. So Ron's going to have her work cut out in the future. We've also just appointed Dr. Yuna Kim. She's come across from Australia. She's a Korean, has a PhD in seabird research. She's been going to be liaising with the high seas fleets to inform the officials, the vessel owners and skippers about the international obligations. There are all sorts of international obligations which they have to make sure are addressed. She'll also be training the fleet's observers to conduct trials and demonstrate best practice for reducing seabird bycatch. So Yuna is already in South Africa, based in Cape Town in the Seabird Conservation Office. We have a third staff member, Johan Koch, who was appointed early this year, and he's going to be going onto the long line fishing vessels in the Cape Town harbour to conduct outreach and to gather information about seabird bycatch practices. I've really abbreviated what these 3 people are going to be doing, but I can tell you now they have their work cut out for them. This is our opportunity to take what we've learned from Cape Town, what Ross and his team have learned from Cape Town working with our fisheries into the high seas, and to have a much more global impact, a much bigger contribution to the conservation of the world's seabirds. So those are the 2 species conservation programs. We of course also work on habitats and sites, and that map there shows the important bird and biodiversity areas around the country, all 112 of them. We're very proud last year to launch 2 important publications, the important bird and biodiversity areas of South Africa, and then the IBA status report. For those of you who don't have copies, I'd encourage you to purchase copies. There are some available outside. Every bird watcher should have a copy, at least of the IBA directory, in their libraries. Now, this was the culmination of 4 years of work, extensive work by Daniel Marnovic and his team, visiting all of these IBAs, and taking assessments of all of those IBAs, re-looking at the boundaries of the IBAs, taking into account the distribution of birds, using the SADC2 data, and more. So the IBA directory is a significant improvement and an update on the original IBA directory, which was published in 1998. We do now know the state of South Africa's IBA network and the most important threats which these IBAs face. And that diagram there illustrates some of the threats, some of the most important threats, and these are really not new to us, but we've now been able to quantify them. Agriculture, the most important threat. Natural system modifications, these are things like mining, urbanization, invasive plants in particular. So these are some of the threats that our IBAs face. We will in the future repeat the exercise, undertake these assessments again. We will then not produce an IBA status report, but an IBA status and trends report. Very importantly, we are doing a lot of work to ensure that these IBAs are protected. Only about half of the IBAs are formally protected as provincial nature reserves or national parks. Most of them remain in private ownership. We're using biodiversity stewardship to protect these IBAs. And you can see on that map, there's quite a few of the IBAs are circled in blue in the eastern parts of the country, and then in the western parts of the country along the coastline. And those are the IBAs in which we're undertaking stewardship work, working with the landowners to try and unlock some of the benefits that they can derive through tax breaks and financial incentives to conserve those important sites. Don't worry about all the detail in that table, but very importantly, that lists in the blue down the left, those 9 IBAs that we're working on. If we are successful in conserving those 9 IBAs, we will add another 193,000 hectares to the country's conservation estate, which is very significant. Now, there's very little money these days for formal acquisition of national parks and nature reserves. This would be a significant contribution that we could make. These IBAs, 9 IBAs, protect a whole lot of threatened species, those which I've circled in red. Okay, one of the important things that we do, and this is particularly through Simon Gear's work as our policy and advocacy manager, is to ensure that any developments that take place in important bird and biodiversity areas are done in a sustainable way. And if we think that the impact is severe, we will get involved. We will register as interested and affected parties, submit comments, attend public meetings, and if necessary, even take legal action to ensure that they do not take place. And let's just list some of the work that Simon's involved with. There's the Middelpunt wetland, the most important site in South Africa for white-winged flufftails. There's 2 mining applications there, which we've been involved with opposing, making the use of some of our legal experts, particularly those at the Centre for Environmental Rights in Cape Town. We've been involved in gas prospecting along the west coast, as well as in the Kruger and Natal. We're very concerned about the CSP plants and the effects that they can have on birds. And more recently, vultures and the mortalities we're experiencing, not only in South Africa, but elsewhere in Southern Africa, and in fact across the continent. And one of the things that Simon Gear is going to be doing as our policy and advocacy manager is seeing how we can bring the problem of vulture poisonings across the continent onto the agendas of government meetings like the African Union. And a lot of work is already happening in these areas. So BirdLife South Africa doesn't only restrict its work to South Africa. Through Simon's work, we engage with our colleagues in Nairobi, our colleagues in Sandy and Cambridge in England, but also we are now doing partner development work in South Africa. We were identified as one of the stronger BirdLife partners in Africa and the Middle East. We're one of only 2 partners in Africa and the Middle East who are now working as giving partner support to neighboring countries and other partners, and Martin Taylor heads up this program. We've just recently concluded a project in Mozambique using Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, where we tried to build civil society capacity. A very successful project. This work has now been completed, and we're going to continue to engage with this organization as a potential precursor for a BirdLife partner in Mozambique. Most importantly, Martin's involved in Zimbabwe, working with BirdLife Zimbabwe, giving them technical assistance and particularly with assistance with fundraising. You can imagine, well, we know in South Africa it's difficult to raise money for our conservation work. It must be even harder in Zimbabwe. So we are the supporting partner for BirdLife Zimbabwe, and Martin spent about 3/4 of his time helping BirdLife Zimbabwe and been successful recently in a number of funding applications. And a number of those have been submitted to conduct work on vultures, places like Hwange National Park. Martin's also going to be involved in a big waterbird survey along the east coast of Africa. We're also involved in the East Atlantic Flyway Initiative. This is work that's been coordinated by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, our partner in England. And a lot of their birds migrate down our west coast along the East Atlantic Flyway and not down the east coast of Africa. So they want to sort of increase their efforts in those countries along the west coast to ensure that these countries and these the important habits are protected. And Martin's been submitting proposals for trying to take waterbird surveys at some of the key sites in Namibia. The other very important publication that we launched last year was our revision of the Red Data Book, and we're very grateful to Eskom for the funding to ensure that this project could be undertaken. It's been 15 years since the previous Red Data Book was published. Barnes 2000 was finally revised as Taylor, Fancy Peacock and Oneness 2015. 85 species are listed as threatened, 47 as near threatened. So the number of birds listed in the Red Data Book has been increased from 125 to 132. Very importantly, there are now more species in the endangered and critically endangered categories. So things are not better off for our birds. We're particularly worried about 2 groups of birds, raptors and seabirds. And Martin and I spent some time today discussing how we can improve our efforts to particularly initiate projects on these most threatened groups of birds. Now, I spoke about the IBA directory earlier, and I spoke about the Red Data Book now. These 2 projects would not have been possible without the information that's been collected during the Southern African Bird Atlas projects, and particularly SABAP2, the most recent project. And illustrative put this this diagram together for me. Forget about all the detail, and all that I think you should focus on is 2015. On the right there, you can see that very long orange bar, and that's the number of cards. It's about 2 cards that were submitted in 2015. Despite initial concerns about sustaining this project well into the future, there's been fantastic uptake, increased observers, increased submissions of Atlas cards. And I think BirdLife, the online application that's been developed to submit Atlas data, has certainly helped. But we would not be able to do what we do without these very important data. And we need to thank all of the citizen scientists. I think many of you that are sitting here today are involved in these projects, and you're contributing ultimately then to bird conservation by atlasing. So thank you very much for that, and please continue doing so. So I've listed some of the successes, and just really at the end, I would just like to say that there are also a number of challenges. And these are the things that keep us awake at night, all the conservation challenges. And the presentations during the 2 days of lab spoke about many of these challenges. There are numerous challenges. And we're really going to have to think very cleverly about how we address them. There were some presentations on very innovative solutions to addressing these challenges, the work we're doing, working with renewable energy developers, the work we're doing with fisheries, to try and develop and implement mitigation measures, the African penguin mainland colony. These are some of the solutions that we're developing to resolve some of these challenges. We worry about the economic climate and the ability for us to raise money to do our work. We worry about political apathy. It just seems sometimes, particularly within the provinces, there's just not support for what we are trying to do. The legislation is in place. We sign these important multilateral environmental agreements. It just doesn't seem to be the political concern and interest for us to achieve our important conservation goal. Another challenge we have is the critics that are out there. And I think this is something that kind of concerns me personally. I was in Cape Town recently, somebody referred to them as armchair critics. I just look at our team of staff, our 35 staff, how they slave away day after day, getting out there into the field at the coalface of conservation, addressing the most important threats and making a difference. And the people can sit behind their computers on Facebook, critical not of the developers, of the people who are having the impact, but of the conservation organizations like us and our fellow conservation organizations who are doing all we can to try and address the important threats and to conserve our biodiversity and our habitats. And lastly, the challenge is the membership demographics. So look at this audience again. We remain fairly white. It's another thing that we're going to have to deal with. Looking ahead, there's a lot of exciting things that we're going to be doing. The conservation programs, we have lots of plans there. Spoke about the FAO-funded work that we're going to be doing in the high seas, initiating new projects on some of the critically endangered species. We're very grateful for the funding we've received from the Dawn Group. We have employed a social media expert, Siobhan Nagia, who's going to be helping us reach 100,000 young people through social media. There's the challenge, Siobhan. And she's now hiding under the table in embarrassment. But we're going to use innovative methods to reach young people. We've employed Ian Outram with funding from the Rare Bird Club to revitalize our community bird guide project. We're going to be doing lots of fundraising for core, fundraising for new projects. We'd like to build a fluff-tail facility at the National Zoological Gardens in Pretoria. We need assistance to build this facility. We'd like to eradicate mice from Marion Island. That project's going to cost about 80 million rand, for anybody's interested in supporting that. We'd like to have an office for our staff in Cape Town. Ross, I put this in especially for you. It doesn't make sense for us to spend 30,000 rand on rent a month for office space. It'd be nice to have our own office in Cape Town. We're planning a number of events. You may know that Sasol has withdrawn their sponsorship for most of the conservation projects around the country. They're going through tough times with the declining oil price. We don't have their funding for the bird fair anymore, so we're going to have a new bird fair going forward. Possibly we call the South African Bird Fair or the BirdLife Bird Fair. We're going to be holding an art evening at Esdell House later this year to raise money for our work. We're going to be holding a Flock at Sea again trip in April 2017, and that's going to take a lot of organization. So lots happening, and just as I said, reporting on some of the work that we do. I'd just like to say at the end that we appreciate the support we receive from everybody. That picture was taken a couple of days ago. That's not all of the delegates that attended the layman's and science labs, just some of them. Others were out birding, some were still in the building attending meetings at that time. But we really appreciate this massive support. And again, our successes are due to the collaborations, all the contributions we receive from our members, from our bird clubs, from our volunteers, the citizen scientists, everybody else that's assisting us in our massive task to conserve our country's birds and their habitats. And I'd like to thank you for all you do to support our work. Thank you.